Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever wondered how you actually truly transform a culture? I
Mm.
mean, really change it, especially when it feels like it's been locked in place for, well, forever.
Yeah, that's a huge question. And our sources today, they suggest something maybe a bit unexpected, that it often starts with just one powerful act,
Which is
embracing vulnerability.
vulnerability. So this deep dive is all about that.
Yeah.
How embracing vulnerability can help transform, say, school cultures, organizational cultures.
Exactly. We're looking at how it helps restore trust, dismantle some really tough oppressive structures like racism.
Hmm.
We're mainly drawing from Chapter 8 of the book Street Data, a next generation model for equity, pedagogy, and school transformation.
Right, street data. So our mission here is to really unpack a framework, something practical that helps you move from just having good intentions about equity to actually making an impact.
Yeah, even when it feels overwhelming. And, often the starting point is tackling something really human.
Shame.
Shame. How does
Yeah.
that fit in? Well, Principal Emma Dunbar, she's quoted talking about needing permission to be transformational, to disrupt things, and crucially, to break that cycle of shame that often keeps people stuck in old ways.
That makes sense. And I can see how leaders feel that pressure. Joe Truss, another principal mentioned in the source, talks about feeling like all eyes on me like Tupac.
Uh-huh, yeah. That pressure to be perfect, right?
Totally. Like, you can't make a single mistake. He
Yep.
talks about how dehumanizing that is and how he realized, he needed to let himself and his staff innovate, try things out.
And that it all started with vulnerability.
Exactly.
And what's really interesting, maybe even counterintuitive for leaders, is how the source positions vulnerability. It's not just a soft skill.
Right, not just about feelings.
No, it's presented as the fundamental leverage point for taking apart these deep cultural patterns like perfectionism, for instance. That's
Yeah.
a big shift in thinking.
And the source links it to Brene Brown's work too, right? Calling vulnerability what
Yeah.
was it?
The birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It's framed as a core stance needed to resist those ingrained cultural habits.
Okay, so to really get why vulnerability is so key for transformation, especially in schools, we need to understand the landscape we're working in. The source talks about something called white supremacy culture, or WSC.
Right. And it's important to understand what that term means in this context. It's not just about, overt hate groups.
No, it's more subtle.
Much more insidious, often. It describes how certain norms and ways of thinking can seep into the ideology and actions of everyone in an organization, even BIPOC staff. It shows up in things like tracking kids into remedial classes based on race or disproportionate discipline.
So it's systemic. These aren't just individual biases, but cultural patterns.
Exactly. Patterns like the constant push for perfection, which seem maybe harmless on the surface, but actually end up reinforcing the very inequities people are trying to fight.
So let's break that down. What does this WSC look like day to day? The source uses Jones and Okun's work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And gives antidotes. First one, perfectionism.
Yeah, perfectionism. In this context, it looks like maybe very little appreciation shown for people's work.
Or constantly pointing out mistakes.
Right, or just no time built in for reflection, for learning from mistakes. The source is clear. It's not about blaming individuals, but seeing how the system fosters this.
And the antidote. What do you do about it?
You actively build a culture of appreciation. Make it clear that mistakes are actually expected, they're part of learning. And when giving feedback,
You start with the positive.
always start with what went well before suggesting changes, and make those suggestions concrete, actionable.
Okay. What's the next characteristic?
Either thinking, black and white thinking.
Good, bad, right, wrong, no nuance.
Pretty much, it connects to perfectionism, and it really oversimplifies complex problems. Like, the source gives the example of thinking poverty is just about a lack of education.
When it's obviously way more complicated than that.
Exactly. So the antidote is to push for more options. Ask, what are other ways we could look at this? Encourage multiple alternatives.
And slow down. Don't rush to judgment.
Right. Slow down for deeper analysis. Move from quick judgment to, real inquiry.
Makes sense. Then there's power hoarding.
Uh-huh. This shows up when sharing power isn't valued. Power is seen as, finite. Like a pie, if I give you some, I have less.
So people in charge might feel threatened by new ideas or changes.
Yeah, they might see challenges to the way things are as personal attacks instead of opportunities for the whole group to grow.
So the fix is to actually build power sharing into the organization's values.
Yes. Make it explicit, and redefine what good leadership looks like. It includes sharing power and trying to understand that challenges aren't always negative. They can be really productive.
Okay, and the last one mentioned here is defensiveness.
Right. This is when the organization seems set up to protect the way things are, the status quo. New ideas are resisted.
A lot of energy goes into protecting feelings, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or protecting the existing hierarchy.
Exactly. And that stops real reflection, real progress.
So the antidote starts with recognizing the fear behind it. Fear of losing comfort, maybe privilege.
Yeah. And you have to work on your own defensiveness first, and then be able to name it when it shows up in the group. Like, hey, I'm noticing we're getting a bit defensive here. How is that helping us reach our equity goals?
Because defensiveness will definitely block progress towards equity.
Absolutely. And the source keeps coming back to this. Resisting all these traits.
Yeah.
Perfectionism, either thinking, power hoarding, defensiveness. It fundamentally starts with vulnerability.
That's the core stance that allows for honest reflection and growth.
Precisely.
So, okay, we understand the landscape, the role of vulnerability. How do we actually do the work? The source offers the equity transformation cycle. Sounds like a roadmap.
It is, but maybe less like a rigid map and more like a compass. It's described as a dynamic way to move in ways that restore trust and dismantle racism by collecting street data.
Street data is the key term from the book title, right? What is that exactly?
Yeah. It's the qualitative insights, the stories, the experiences gathered directly from students, families, community members, especially those whose voices are often marginalized or ignored.
So not just test scores and attendance numbers.
Right. It's about centering those voices from the margins and using their insights to reimagine what's possible. But one common pitfall the source warns about:
What's that?
trying to rush it. Or treating it like a checklist you just tick off. It's a cycle, it's ongoing.
Got it. So the compass metaphor, what are the points?
Okay, think north, east, south, west. North is listen, and the mindset is radical inclusion.
East is uncover, with a mindset of curiosity.
South is reimagine, thinking with creativity.
And west is move, which takes courage.
And connecting all of those, running through the whole thing, is reflect and collaborate. It's not stage one, step two, done. It's fluid.
Okay, let's dive into the first point. Listen with a mindset of radical inclusion, hearing those voices from the margins.
And a key tool here, central to design thinking, is empathy interviews.
So talking to people, but with real empathy.
Yes. Collecting that street data through open-ended conversations. And the source makes a fascinating point, remember, that 93% of meaning is nonverbal.
Wow. So it's not just the words, it's the tone, the body language, what's not being said.
Exactly. You tune into all of it. The process involves asking maybe 8 open-ended questions, giving space for reflection, then bringing the insights together.
There's that example of Emma Dunbar's leadership team using these interviews with Black students about literacy. What did they learn?
Well, they uncovered something really important. The students felt a real connection and affinity with teachers who understood their culture, but they also deeply craved academic challenge.
So it wasn't about lowering standards.
Not at all. It was about being seen and being pushed intellectually. And for the students, often it was the first time they felt leadership really heard their specific experiences. That's powerful.
Definitely. The source also mentions co-generative dialogues, using Christopher Emdin's hip-hop cipher idea.
Yeah, it's about creating these collaborative sense-making spaces, like a cipher, where everyone's voice builds on the others, creating shared understanding. It really shifts power dynamics away from traditional meetings.
Okay, so after deep listening, we move to uncover with a mindset of curiosity, analyzing that street data.
Right, looking for the hidden patterns, the root causes, the narratives underneath.
And there's a specific street data protocol for this, like a structured way to discuss the findings.
Yes, a group process, maybe 45, 60 minutes minimum. You start with connecting, just checking in, sharing initial reactions to the data.
Then you observe. What does that involve?
Really reading through the interview notes, the stories, looking for patterns, repeating words, metaphors, common themes. The source even suggests, like, physically cutting up notes and clustering themes with highlighters and scissors.
Getting hands-on with the data. I like that.
Makes it tangible. Then you interpret. Naming the themes, asking what this tells you about the experiences of vulnerable learners, what systemic issues might be at play.
And then comes a step that sounds crucial, but maybe uncomfortable. Feel.
Yeah, acknowledging the emotions the data brings up. Because sometimes it's tough. It might reveal injustice or pain.
And the source says don't numb yourself to it.
Right. Use deep breaths, stay present with the discomfort, resist the urge to just intellectualize it away. Because if you don't feel it, you might miss the urgency and your solutions won't be as deep. Skipping this feel step is tempting, but the source really stresses its importance.
Hmm. And finally, reflect, consider. What stands out? What's the opportunity here? What could be the next steps?
Exactly, which leads perfectly into the next point on the compass. Reimagine with a mindset of creativity.
Using those insights to design something new, something innovative for instruction or school systems that really centers those marginalized voices.
Yeah, moving beyond the usual top-down stuff, the source gives several strategies here. One is student-informed curriculum.
So actually designing lessons or projects based on what students say they need or are interested in.
Yeah, precisely. Making it relevant because they help shape it. Another idea is student-driven professional development.
Wait, students leading PD for teachers?
Kind of. The idea is students are the experts on their own learning. So bring diverse groups of students together to share what actually helps them learn. It flips the traditional PD model.
That's bold. I like it. What else?
Student-led conferences, empowering students to lead the conversation about their own progress and goals. It shifts ownership.
Builds agency.
Exactly. And then student design challenges. Let students tackle real school issues, designing solutions for inclusion, well-being, even things like equitable homework policies or anti-racist actions.
Tapping into their creativity and lived experience. Does this stuff actually work?
Well, the source points back to Emma Dunbar's school. They saw a 35% drop in chronic absenteeism for Black boys after implementing these kinds of student-centered approaches. Attendance equity gaps started closing.
Wow, 35%, that's not small. It shows these aren't just nice ideas, they get results.
Definitely underscores that deep listening and inclusion are fundamental to equity and effective practice. Which brings us to the last point. Move with a mindset of courage.
Taking action. Implementing the changes.
Yes, and embracing what the source calls safe-to-fail experiments or hacks, little trials to test things out, and resisting that pull to just slide back into the old ways.
Hacks. I like that term. Small bets almost. What are some examples?
They're described as small, maybe 4 to 6 week experiments. For school culture, it could be trying daily mindfulness or listening circles or supporting a student-led anti-racism campaign.
Okay. And in the classroom?
Maybe an author's chair where kids share their writing or rearranging desks into circles for discussions physically changing the space to change the dynamic.
Small shifts. Big potential impact. What about family engagement?
Simple things. Making positive phone calls home just to celebrate something specific a student did well. Or holding cultural wealth teach-ins where families share their skills and knowledge with the school. Building real partnership.
These hacks make the move phase feel less intimidating. It's not about overhauling everything overnight.
Exactly. It's about starting somewhere, learning, adapting. And the source gives us some reflection questions to consider for ourselves,
Right, like, how do I disrupt WSC in my setting? Where can I be more vulnerable? What's one step I can take?
And what might get in the way? What roadblocks might I face? And what support do I need to keep going?
Powerful questions. So wrapping this all up, this deep dive really shows that transforming culture is, well, it's a journey.
A complex one, yeah. But also really rewarding. That puzzle image from the source material you mentioned earlier really brings it together.
Where vulnerability is the foundation piece.
Yeah, it's at the bottom, connecting everything else. Deep listening, agency, coherence, holism, anti-racism, awareness, symmetry, that idea of being a warm demander.
Setting high expectations with high support. Vulnerability enables all of that.
It seems so. It's this ongoing process of learning, and maybe unlearning too. It's not about being perfect.
It's about courageous movement. Being, as the source says, perfectly imperfect.
I like that. Perfectly imperfect.
So for you listening, what's the takeaway? The source leaves us with this really evocative image. Just start walking. The street is vibrant and full of color and texture and story. The path is jagged and perfectly imperfect. So the challenge maybe is to think about one small, courageous, safe-to-fail experiment you could try. One step you could take in your own school, your organization, your classroom.
To embrace a little more vulnerability and start walking down that path toward transformation.
What's that first imperfect step for you?